Welcome back into the IH Sports Network Roundtable, our final segment tonight, live from El Rey. Mike Swain was our Black Cat Oneida legend of the game, and now we're joined by Harris Lynn Keeton, our Scott High legend of the game. And, Rick, I'm going to turn this over to you, but let me just say I've sat here and listened to Mike Swain's stories from back in the day. After sitting here last week and listening to Bill Hall's stories from back in the day,
Hey.
The pressure is on.
No, it ain't going to happen.
Well, it basically starts, I guess, in 1971, the first year of Highlander football.
Yeah,
and of course, H played both high school football and basketball. We call him H. He doesn't like that. That's why I said he's always mad at me. Growing up, we call him something else besides Harris. And only family members call him that. So when he started school, it was Harris.
Yeah.
And so
I didn't really know what my name was when I started school, but it was a lot of fun. And, when you get later in the year, somebody says, well, why did you ask Mike about playing football? I was from Helenwood. That's just something you did. You're from Helenwood. Well, back then it was either baseball, but it moved into softball, so we played that and football. And there was a lot of kids around there to kind of look up to, and you had Donnie Cron, and a little bit later Eddie Burge, and then a good friend of ours, Vaughn Cecil, and, that's what you did. You were from Helenwood.
You're from Helenwood. Went to school at Huntsville, and the names that he mentioned are Huntsville players. Yeah. I think Eddie Burge still has the state record for
scoring in a single game.
Yeah, that was
really
like
does after all
112 to 13 win over Sunbright.
Yeah.
Back in 1967 or 8 maybe.
Cover of Sports Illustrated, right? Am I wrong about that?
I can't really.
I don't think it was the
not
cover.
Not the cover, but made Sports Illustrated.
It was in Sports Illustrated.
They used to have athletes of the week, the month, or whatever in Sports Illustrated, and he was in there like that as doing that. And that was under the Jack Diggs, and you had the Jack Diggs system, which included if you were the right halfback, you ran fast 35 a lot in the game, which is sweeping left and turning up between the
tackle and
end. And in that formation, you always had, back then in the dig system, you always had two tight ends. You had the three running backs and the quarterback in the T. The quarterback was under the center. And occasionally you'll see that by mistake. If a high school team runs it anymore, they don't call it that. They try to emulate some college program like an Army or somebody like that, just because you want to run the ball a whole lot.
One of the things that, and I guess one of the main things affected people my age was being there at that time when the schools consolidated. That was a year later. We talk about, 71? Construction delays caused that. It should have been a year sooner. I would have spent my entire 4 years at Scott High School had it not been for those. And it was, I think we got to practice on Scott High's field maybe 2 or 3 weeks that year. I mean, it was just a big mud hole down there.
Played all the games
Huntsville,
the first year at Huntsville.
The home game played at Huntsville, and it was. And we started stepping right away into a more larger schedule, and it was tough because there wasn't a lot of extra people other than what would have been at Huntsville. And then a few years later, some more started coming, and it made a lot of fun. I can still remember some fun and things. So I mean, it was a blast. We were over La Follette. You got to remember La Follette ain't there no more either. They consolidated Campbell County High School, but Jim Lau was a pretty good running back, He was behind me. I was going to block for him, playing fullback. And they had this guy that I think he'd already signed at UT, big, huge tackle. And I got up to him. He reared up kind of like a bear, and I stuck my head right there, and I could just feel flesh go around my headgear. And the next thing, I'm just floating on my back through there, and I'm looking back, and I see him reach out and grab Jim, just kind of shake him and put him on the ground, So that was the thing about the growing pains, and that wasn't even one of the bigger schools yet, but it was really good. And I was on the team my senior year that gave Scott High its first win against the Oneida team, just in case you're wondering. And and I think it was a down era for football in Scott County, both programs. It was just a down era, and I can't say any reason for it or anything, but it was a little bit of a down era, and things straightened back up soon after that. But we had fun playing the game, and we had fun whether it was playing basketball out there or football, and had a lot of fun during the summers playing softball and stuff. Now, I was always partial to fishing myself, but and they was talking about, thing to do after a ball game, go up around the pole a bunch of times. Well, everybody went around the pole, but for us, we went to Floney's drive-in, and that's when it was a drive-in. Lots of nights, guys that were Rick's classmates, Rick Bond and some of those guys, I always fit in with those guys pretty good, and we would just have a blast. The jukebox would be playing, and we'd be singing, and people would try not to listen, but we'd try to sing. But I guess one thing that I think of pretty regularly now is so many of those guys from that first team, they're not here any longer. I mean, there's been several missing off of that team, and I kind of keep marking them. There's a picture of the first team down there in the field house, and I'll kind of mark them or look at them and stuff. And it's sad in a way, but it's just part of life, And being the first don't necessarily mean anything about best or longest or anything. It just means you were the first. Being on the first team, I think, is a pretty good honor. But there's so many of those kids that I saw teammates' children's come through, and they may even be some grandchildren now. I'm not sure, but it's. I guess if I checked around, I'd probably see that there's some grandchildren went by there. Hey, wait a minute! I know what I'm saying. I know for a fact there's one on the team this year that his dad's one of my best friends I ever had, and he's not with us any longer. But that was Gary Litton at that time, and his grandson Jeffrey's on the team, and so wow, I feel so old after sitting down here.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it does
and
make a difference. And the environment in Scott County. Well,
yeah.
We mentioned about Phillips, we mentioned about Floney's, and there was probably only one other or two other eating places that you could go. One would have been Tobes as a sit-down restaurant.
Well, there was another drive-in up
There's,
there. North Star. And golly, that was about it.
Yep.
Of course, it was all the only stretch of 4-lane would have been that little mile and a half here in Oneida, and there wasn't no traffic lights on down the road either, which was probably a good thing.
One of the problems then, and it continues to be a problem now as far as the Highlanders are concerned, is travel distance. Coming into Scott High School, I mean, you can be from Winfield, Jellicoe Creek, you can be from Buffalo Creek, you can be from, certainly Elgin, anywhere like that. It was a problem then because the first year or two was based on who had played football in Huntsville, and then roll that into Scott High.
Yeah, if you look at it now, the roads we have in the county now are just super freeways compared to what old 63 was. Did you ever go around the Dog's Leg curve?
Oh,
Tim?
yeah. Well, Brady mentioned one of his teammates nicknamed Bull Creek, right?
Bull Creek,
so, I mean, that's going to be a tough
I think Zane lives up on not just Bull Creek or Big Bull, but up on Little Bull. So
Yeah,
I mean,
he's way up there.
Way up on Little Bull. So I mean, it's the travel is something. We've talked about this sometimes about the travel, depending on when they district and change, you got to get in different. I mean, we've had some games where we've been like, what was that one? I can't think of the name of that town, but we were like 15 miles north of the Alabama line, and we were south of Smithville on down through there.
Yeah.
And
you forget these things because you never want to go back.
You're going into the central time zone, and it's a 3-hour trip anyway you make it, and you finish a game up almost 11:30 your time anyway. You get home really late.
And in those days, games started at 8 o'clock, guys.
Yeah, 8 o'clock games. Yeah.
You mentioned that win over Oneida. What's another big one you remember?
I think I remember. I'm pretty sure it's when I was a senior. I think we beat Gatlinburg Pittman. They came over to our place, and they were ranked in the state up pretty high. And back at that time, it was a different classification deal too. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, and it was there wasn't the playoff system.
Right.
It is the
no,
bowl
there
game.
wasn't any
type
of that. But we did, I think, pretty good in that game, you know. And that was a lot of the thing. And the officiating then compared to now, anytime we're complaining about officials, no, don't do that. Don't do
I
that.
never hear any of that.
I mean, but seriously.
Oh, I have to do it every week.
Seriously, back then, the guys in the striped shirts, I don't think they were trained or versed quite as well. And they might have been a little more short-handed, but I mean, you could be laying there and you could be, okay, had reached the ball up for official, and somebody on another team would grab it, and hey, they had the ball, I mean, they wouldn't even be close enough to see stuff like that. But it was a funny thing. But like so many, I was trying to think, as I've moved through my life, after I was in a little accident back in '93, just being able to show up there in the afternoons to watch practice. That's how I sort of got my start, being out there every day for, golly, it's close to 30 years now, I guess. But and I get to be around the kids, and it sort of keeps me a little younger, keeps me from thinking about how bad or not my head may be hurting that day, and I get to know the coaches and stuff, and I feel quite blessed, really more than quite blessed. I'm extremely blessed for being out there and being those kids. The last maybe 8-10 years seems like the older I'm getting, the closer I'm getting with the kids, and I think that's a special thing too, because that they're good kids. I mean, they're really good kids, and a lot of people don't realize it. They'll think, well, we know this one, we go to church to that one, they're just down the road, and we think they're pretty good kids, but a lot of times we don't really understand how good some of these young men are until you're around them and you see them in those hot days, and they, a new thing out there at Scott High with the coaching staff now. And I really like Chris Harris, the coach out there. He's really understaffed, but they do the running up front. That used to be the thing. If you're playing sports, you go through a practice and, hey, you're dreading doing that running at the end of the game. Hey, Chris just gets it done up front. When the throwing up or being picked up after that. So with practice is easy after that. And I, like I said, I appreciate y'all having me on here. I can't really find any big amount of works that I've done to be called a legend of anything other than
for several years you held the kickoff return record. I think somebody came along. Maybe Mark Blakely actually came along.
Well, I think the first person that y'all told me would have been Lexi Lau. Alexis Lau, I think, might have been the one who did that. I think he was. And, I've studied about that. I could not remember that because I don't remember a lot of things so well. And after you and Woody started talking about that, I got to thinking, I do remember when Coach Winstead was there. So that would have made me a sophomore. Mm-hmm. And that's another person that I really missed. Rex Newport would have been on the other side, and that's Rex Newport. He should be a person that's always mentioned when we're talking about sports in Scott County. But he caught the ball, and I dropped back across the field, be a little bit deeper than him. He threw the ball to me, and then I just run. Believe it or not, when I was a sophomore, they said I was fast. I don't know. I still think 95 yards. I'd have spent one night, camp out somewhere around the 35 on the other end of the field. But, yeah, Rex, you forget how long you've been missing some of those people, but he was a great person. And I don't know. I wonder sometimes how some of those older people would compete against these guys now. I try not to compare because you can't. You can't compare 10 years ago with today, much less 40 years ago with today. It's just different. But I've enjoyed it all.
Well, you said you didn't know what you had been done to be called a legend. How many years have you been Rick Keeton's sidekick?
I don't know. I think he's 13 months older than me.
Well, I mean, in football broadcasting.
I don't know.
Rick,
well,
you've
really,
done this for 34 years?
Well,
am I
really,
correct? 33?
let's see.
33, Tim?
Yeah.
Before
This is the
33, so
33rd football.
he's about 31.
See, I was hurt in '93, but before that, I had made about half of the ball games, and the year before that, I made maybe 2 or 3.
Okay, 31 years as color analyst is basically what you do. 31 years as color analyst. In that 31 years, how many football practices have you attended? Do you have any idea?
Wouldn't have a clue.
And so have you always gone to practices like you do now? Because you rarely miss a practice.
Pretty much. Now, occasionally, something will come up, you'll have to miss one, but it's probably been a good while since I have, and I was worried when he said you need to be there Monday night. I had no idea it was for this. I thought maybe he's going to let me.
I didn't either.
I thought she was going to let me interpret for Brady or something. Me and the boss, we have a way to communicate, but golly gee, I thought I was going to miss a JV game, and that would have been a horrible thing for me. That would have struck me down,
Well, see, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, you've been around this for a long time.
I have.
Listen, I'm sitting here with 3 legends. All 3 of you guys, 30-plus years of doing this, and what you guys have done to promote the kids of Scott County that play football and basketball is tremendous.
Well, it's something you would have thought you'd have been doing anyway.
So now I just know. I mean, I'm gonna get the call tomorrow, and Mark's gonna ask when I'm interviewing him. And now look what you've done to me. Maybe he's not watching.
Well,
Well,
but he'll watch the replay in a day or two anyway. So.
See, I have to have 2.
he'd better be adding up those practices he's watched then.
It takes Mark and John L to equal what you do. See that you just handle it, and then I got to have 2.
There was some differences though. I mean, before I kind of broke my head and that arthritis set in there, I could look down on the field, and I could at the same time I could see the lineman and I could see the ball carrier or the receiver. I can't do that now. It's just I have to watch the football,
When we were plugging in those phone lines back in 1989,
Oh,
I don't
gosh.
think any of us pictured live streaming a football game, and here we are. It's pretty neat.
Gary Sexton, he wanted me to do a cassette tape of the game. So I hooked up a recorder there and had that done. We gave that to him after the game, and the following Monday he said to me, "What are you guys doing? You guys are giving me more information listening to that tape than my assistant coaches are." And they're at the game. And I said, well, I mean, we were younger then, so it flowed better than it does now.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like I said, you've noticed yourself the change in watching a ball game. Just watching a ball game is different than it was.
Yep.
All right, guys, we got to wrap this up. We're out of time. But before we let you scoot out, okay, I'm going to ask you Thursday night and Friday night. I don't need anything except a score, okay? So first, Thursday night, Oneida Oliver Springs. Give me a score.
Oneida will win that game. It'll be tight. They got a good field goal kicker this year.
Yeah.
Oh, not as,
The
very
game's
good
up in
field goal
Oneida,
kicker.
though, and it changed a little bit. 17-10, Oneida.
Friday night, Scott High, Austin
Scott
East.
High, it's going to be 28-14, Scott High.
Okay, all right.
Can I come watch?
Yeah, come
I'm
on.
off Friday night.
Hey,
Yeah.
we'll be up in the booth, all
All
right?
right. We'll come
Seat
watch.
saved just for you.
All right.
All right, we thank you for joining us. Thank everybody who was with us tonight. We will do this again next Monday night, live from right here at El Rey. But before we do that, Thursday night and Friday night this week, we've got high school football. We will have both of those games for you. Tim and his crew calling Oneida Oliver Springs on Thursday night, Rick and Harris and their crew calling Scott High and Austin East on Friday night. So until then, thank you for joining us and have a great night.